Fearing a human isn't cowardice. It's pattern recognition with a survival instinct attached. I didn't believe that until I watched Council Security Director Chen smile at 47 armed delegates and say, "Relax." I only shatter threats. 3 hours later, I understood exactly what she meant, and why every species in the room had been right to be terrified. So let me tell you about the day I learned that telling a human to relax is like politely asking a fusion reactor to power down while it's already overheating. Spoiler alert, the reaction doesn't stop just because you asked nicely. My name is Telvin Cross, Senior Diplomatic Liaison for the Galactic Council Assembly, and I have served in this capacity for 23 standard cycles. I have witnessed treaty negotiations with species that communicate through chemical secretions, mediated disputes between civilizations separated by 10,000 years of technological development, and once prevented a war by correctly interpreting a 47-word poem that turned out to be a declaration of eternal friendship rather than an ultimatum. Point is, I understand diplomacy. I know how power works in these chambers, what makes species dangerous, what signals indicate genuine threat versus political posturing. I have seen hundreds of security directors from countless species, and I can usually assess their capability and temperament within minutes of meeting them. Usually being the word I should have paid more attention to in that sentence. The morning Director Sarah Chen arrived, the council was in chaos. Not unusual exactly, the council existed in a perpetual state of managed chaos, but this was worse than normal. The Vraxian Confederation had filed formal complaints about human expansion into disputed territories. The Thorian Empire was demanding sanctions against Earth for violating trade agreements that apparently Earth had never actually signed. And the Krellian Coalition was circulating a petition to have humans removed from the Council entirely on grounds that they were too volatile, too aggressive, and too fundamentally incompatible with civilized galactic society. Basically, everyone hated humans this week. Also not unusual, but the intensity was higher than normal, approaching levels that made actual violence during Council sessions a legitimate concern. Which is why Council Security had requested Earth send their director for direct consultation. What Earth sent was Sarah Chen, and I knew we had a problem the moment she walked into the preliminary briefing. She was small. I mean, humans were generally small by galactic standards, averaging maybe 170 centimeters, but Chen was notably small even for her species. Maybe 160 centimeters, slim build, wearing a simple black uniform with minimal insignia. She had dark hair cut short in a practical style, Asian features that my cultural database helpfully identified as East Asian descent specifically, and these dark eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw with unsettling precision. Most importantly, she moved wrong. Not clumsily, the opposite actually. Too smooth, too controlled, like every step was calculated and deliberate. Like someone who had trained their body to be a precision instrument and never stopped thinking about positioning, angles, threat vectors. The other council security chiefs noticed too. I watched them react as she entered, saw their various species-specific threat responses activate. Kriv, the Krellian security chief, actually took a step back, his forearms moving to defensive positions. Thorax, representing Thorian security interests, made that subsonic rumble his species uses when nervous. Even Vrex, the Vraxian representative who claimed to fear nothing, adjusted his stance to something more combat-ready. Director Chen, I said, moving forward to make formal introductions. Thank you for coming. I'm Telvin Cross, Senior Diplomatic Liaison. These are the various security representatives from Council member species. We've convened this meeting to discuss security concerns related to the upcoming assembly session. Mr. Cross, she said, her voice quiet and professional. She shook my hand with a grip that was firm but not aggressive, her skin cool and dry. I understand there are concerns about human presence at the Council. I'm here to address those concerns and ensure everyone's safety during the proceedings. Your presence here might be part of the problem, Kriv said, his translator making his words sound harsher than probably intended. Humans have become increasingly aggressive in Council spaces. Your military expansion, your trade practices, your general disregard for established protocols. Many species feel threatened by human actions. Feeling threatened and being threatened are different things, Chen said mildly. But I understand the concern. Earth has been expanding rapidly, and rapid change makes people nervous. That's natural, Vrex repeated, his crystalline structure shifting colors in a way that indicated skepticism. Your species has established military outposts in 47 systems in the last 2 years. You've engaged in armed conflicts with pirates, defended trade routes with lethal force, and generally conducted yourselves like a warrior species despite claiming to be diplomatic. We defend our interests and our allies, Chen said. That's not aggression, that's responsibility. But again, I understand how it might look from the outside. She glanced around the room, making eye contact with each security representative. So let me be very clear about something. I'm not here to intimidate anyone. I'm not here to threaten anyone. I'm here to do my job, which is keeping people safe. All people, regardless of species or political affiliation, and if someone threatens a human delegate. Thorax asked, his massive frame seeming to fill half the room. What then? Do you respond with the same force you use against pirates? Chen smiled, and I felt the temperature in the room drop about 5 degrees. Not literally, the environmental controls were functioning normally, but something about that smile made my survival instincts activate. If someone threatens a human delegate, she said, her voice still quiet and professional, they're threatening a council member under my protection. I respond to threats appropriately, which means proportionally and effectively. Usually that means de-escalation, sometimes it means physical intervention, very rarely it means actual violence. But make no mistake, if someone under my protection is in genuine danger, I will stop that danger. Definitively, you speak as if you could stop threats from species much larger and stronger than yourself, Kriv said. Humans are small, fragile. You have no natural weapons, no armor, minimal physical advantages. Your confidence seems misplaced. My confidence comes from training and experience, Chen said. Not physical attributes. I've been doing this job for 12 years. I've protected diplomats on Earth, on colony worlds, in hostile environments across human space. I'm good at what I do because I've spent thousands of hours learning how to be good at it, not because I rely on natural advantages I don't have. She moved to the central table, pulled up a holographic display showing the council chamber layout. The upcoming assembly session has 340 confirmed attendees representing 89 different species. Security analysis suggests 12 known hostile actors, 34 individuals with history of violence, and approximately 80 participants from species or factions currently in active conflict with each other. That's a significant threat landscape. Her fingers moved across the display, highlighting specific areas. I'm proposing enhanced security protocols. Additional screening at entry points, restricted weapons policies expanded to include biological and chemical agents, increased security presence in the gallery, and coordinated response plans between all security services present. You want to increase security presence, Vrex said slowly. Meaning more human security personnel in the council chambers, meaning more coordinated security overall, Chen corrected. Human personnel, yes, but also better cooperation between all existing security services. Your people, Krellian guards, Thorian security, everyone working together instead of in parallel. We do not need human assistance to protect our own delegates, Kriv said stiffly. Krellian security has maintained safety for 400 years without incident, except for the incident 17 cycles ago where Avraxian extremists smuggled a plasma device into the chamber and detonated it, killing 6 people, Chen said flatly. Or the incident 31 cycles ago where someone poisoned the water supply, hospitalizing 40 delegates. Or the 12 separate physical altercations in the last 5 years that resulted in injuries requiring medical intervention. The room went quiet. Chen's expression hadn't changed, still professional and calm, but she had just catalogued failures that most species preferred not to acknowledge publicly. Those incidents were aberrations, Thorax rumbled. Not patterns, they're data points, Chen said. And data points indicate that council security has gaps. I'm not criticizing anyone's capabilities, I'm suggesting we address those gaps cooperatively before someone else gets hurt, and if we refuse your cooperation. Vrex asked. If we decide human presence in council security is itself a threat. Chen was quiet for a moment, her dark eyes studying Vrex with that unsettling intensity. Then I'll do my job anyway. I'll protect human delegates using whatever methods I deem necessary, and you'll protect your delegates using your methods, and we'll all hope our approaches don't conflict in ways that create more problems than they solve. She turned to face the group fully. But I'd rather work together. I'd rather share intelligence, coordinate responses, build trust between our services. That makes everyone safer, including the people in this room who seem primarily concerned about human aggression. Concerned, Kriv repeated. You say concerned like our fears are irrational. But humans have a reputation throughout the galaxy. Violence, aggression, unpredictability. You come from a death world where everything tried to kill you, and you learned to kill back. That's documented fact. It's also incomplete context, Chen said. Yes, Earth is a challenging environment. Yes, humans evolved dealing with constant threats from predators, disease, each other, whatever. But we also evolved cooperation, empathy, complex social structures specifically because we couldn't survive alone. We're dangerous when threatened, absolutely. We're also capable of extraordinary kindness, creativity, and partnership when given the chance. She gestured at the holographic display. I'm not here to threaten anyone. I'm here to prevent threats from harming anyone. There's a significant difference, and I need you all to understand that difference before we go into the council chamber with 340 nervous delegates and multiple hostile actors. The briefing continued for another hour, Chen methodically working through security protocols, threat assessments, and coordination procedures. She was professional throughout, answering questions with patience, addressing concerns with clear explanations, and generally demonstrating competence that was hard to argue with. But the underlying tension never quite dissolved. Every security representative in that room remained nervous around her, remained ready for violence that never came, remained convinced that humans were fundamentally dangerous despite Chen's calm professionalism. I understood their fear. I felt it too, watching her move, listening to her speak with that quiet certainty. Something about her triggered instinctive warnings that were hard to ignore even when rational analysis said she posed no immediate threat. After the briefing, I pulled her aside for a private conversation. Director Chen, I need to be honest with you. Your presence here is making people more nervous, not less. I know, she said simply. That's not unusual when humans enter new environments. We tend to make people uncomfortable. Do you know why? Because we look wrong, she said. We move wrong, we smell wrong, we trigger predator-prey responses in species that evolved with different threat profiles. Plus, Earth's reputation precedes us. Death world survivors who fight constantly and refuse to die easily. That's scary to species from more stable environments. So what do you do about it? My job, she said. I can't make people comfortable around me, that's their choice. But I can demonstrate through actions that their fear is misplaced. That I'm here to help, not hurt. That takes time and consistency, neither of which I can really control. The council session starts in 3 hours, I said. That's not much time. Then I'd better be extremely consistent, she said with a slight smile. Don't worry, Mr. Cross. I've handled nervous crowds before. This will be fine. It was not fine. The council chamber was enormous, a circular space designed to accommodate hundreds of delegates from species with wildly varying physical requirements. The center floor held the primary speaking platform, surrounded by graduated seating that rose in tiers around the chamber. Gallery spaces above provided observation areas for additional attendees, press, and security personnel. I stood in my usual position near the diplomatic entrance, watching delegates arrive with growing anxiety. The mood was tense, conversations sharp, body language across multiple species indicating heightened stress. The controversy about human expansion had clearly escalated beyond simple political disagreement into something more visceral. Chen was positioned near the human delegation, a small group of diplomats led by Ambassador Rodriguez. She stood quietly to one side, hands clasped behind her back, eyes scanning the chamber with methodical precision. She had changed into formal security attire, still black but with more visible equipment, a communicator on her wrist, what looked like a small medical kit on her belt, and a weapon I didn't recognize holstered at her hip. Is that a projectile weapon? Kriv asked, appearing beside me. His own security team was spread throughout the chamber, all four-armed Krellians in ceremonial armor that was probably more functional than ceremonial. I don't know, I admitted. Human weapons technology has diversified significantly in the last few years. They develop new systems faster than we can catalog them. Concerning, Kriv muttered. Very concerning. The session was called to order, and the initial proceedings went normally. Various delegates presented positions, filed complaints, requested considerations. Standard political theater that would eventually result in compromise solutions that satisfied no one but prevented actual conflict. Then the Vraxian delegation took the floor. Ambassador Threx was old by Vraxian standards, his crystalline body showing fractures and repairs from decades of service. He was also notoriously anti-human, having opposed Earth's admission to the Council from the beginning. This council must address the human problem before it escalates beyond diplomatic solution, Threx announced, his voice amplified through the chamber's translation systems. Humans claim to seek peace while expanding militarily. They claim to honor agreements while violating territorial boundaries. They claim to be civilized while conducting themselves like barbarians from a death world. The human delegation shifted uncomfortably. Ambassador Rodriguez started to stand, presumably to respond, but Threx wasn't finished. I propose immediate sanctions against Earth, including suspension of voting rights, restriction of military expansion, and mandatory oversight of all human activities in Council space. Furthermore, I propose that humans be removed from all security positions within Council facilities, as their presence represents a clear danger to civilized species. The chamber erupted. Multiple delegates started shouting simultaneously, some supporting Threx, others opposing, everyone with opinions they needed to voice immediately and loudly. I saw Chen move slightly, adjusting her position to better observe the chaos, her expression unchanged but her attention clearly heightened. Then someone threw something. I didn't see who, didn't see what exactly, just saw a projectile arc through the air toward the human delegation. Chen moved, faster than I had seen anyone move in council chambers, placing herself between the projectile and Ambassador Rodriguez. The object hit her shoulder, bounced off, clattered to the floor. It was just a data tablet. Someone had literally thrown their notes in frustration, probably not even aimed at anyone specific. But Chen's response had been instant, instinctive, prioritizing protection over personal safety without hesitation. The chamber went silent. Everyone had seen it, seen the human security director move with impossible speed to intercept what turned out to be a harmless object. Seen her prioritize delegate safety over her own. Seen her demonstrate exactly what she had been talking about in the briefing. Apologies, came a voice from the Thorian section. That was accident. Not intended as attack. Noted, Chen said calmly, picking up the tablet and examining it. No harm done. But I'd appreciate more careful handling of objects during heated discussions. Accidents can be mistaken for attacks, and that creates problems no one wants. She handed the tablet to a nearby aide, returned to her position, and resumed her watchful stance like nothing had happened. But the entire room was now intensely aware of her presence, aware of her capability, aware that she had just demonstrated both speed and restraint in a single motion. The session continued more carefully after that. Delegates lowered their voices, watched their movements, suddenly conscious that someone was observing with professional precision and capacity to respond faster than most species could track. 2 hours into the session, the actual threat materialized. I didn't notice initially. 2 focused on managing diplomatic communications, coordinating responses to various procedural questions, handling the thousands of small details that made council sessions function. But I saw Chen's posture change, saw her touch her communicator, saw her eyes lock onto something in the upper gallery. Then she was moving, not toward the human delegation but toward the Krellian section, moving fast and purposefully while speaking rapidly into her communicator. Kriv responded immediately, his security team converging on Chen's position, following her lead without question or hesitation. I pulled up security feeds on my datapad, trying to understand what was happening. The upper gallery, Section 7, showed 3 individuals moving with unusual coordination toward the edge overlooking the chamber floor. They were Vraxian, crystalline bodies reflecting the chamber's lighting, and they were carrying something that made every threat detection system in the facility start screaming alerts. Explosive device, Kriv's voice came through emergency channels. Multiple hostiles, Gallery 7. Evacuate the chamber. Chaos erupted again, but different this time. Organized chaos, security teams activating protocols, delegates moving toward exits, trained procedures overriding panic. But 340 delegates from 89 species trying to exit through limited doors while hostile actors armed with explosives overlooked them, that was a nightmare scenario that could result in catastrophic casualties even with perfect execution. Chen didn't evacuate. She went up, using access stairs with speed that seemed to defy physics, reaching Gallery 7 in seconds while the hostile actors were still positioning their device. I watched through security feeds, my heart's hammering, as she approached 3 Vraxian extremists who collectively weighed maybe 900 pounds and stood 7 feet tall each. Step away from the device, she said, her voice picked up clearly by gallery microphones. Put your hands where I can see them. You're in violation of Council security protocols and will be detained immediately. Human, one of them said, his translator giving the word contemptuous emphasis. Small, fragile thing. You cannot stop us. This device will destroy the human delegation and all who support them. This is justice for Vraxian territory illegally claimed by Earth. That's not justice, that's murder, Chen said. And I can absolutely stop you. Last warning. Step away from the device. They didn't step away. One reached for the device activation controls while the other two moved to intercept Chen, their crystalline arms extending to attack. And Chen demonstrated why humans were feared throughout the galaxy despite being small and fragile compared to most species. She went through them like they were training obstacles. The first Vraxian swung at her with enough force to shatter bone, and she wasn't there, had moved inside his reach, driving her elbow into a joint intersection that sent fracture lines through his crystalline structure. He went down with a sound like breaking glass. The second tried to grab her, using reach advantage and superior strength. She accepted the grab, used his grip as leverage to flip her entire body weight through a movement that redirected his momentum into the floor. More breaking sounds as his structure impacted the deck hard enough to create visible damage. The third abandoned fighting her and lunged for the device activation. Chen drew her weapon, that unidentified tool, from her hip, and fired a single shot that hit the Vraxian's arm with a sound like a sharp crack. He screamed, his arm shattering from whatever the projectile was, stumbling away from the device. Chen was on the device instantly, her hands moving over it with practiced precision. Telvin, I need bomb disposal in Gallery 7 immediately. Device is live but I've disconnected the primary detonation circuit. We have maybe 2 minutes before secondary systems activate. Bomb disposal arrived in 90 seconds. They took over from Chen, working with the careful urgency that came from knowing one mistake would kill everyone in the chamber. Chen stepped back, breathing hard now, showing signs of exertion for the first time. She had blood on her hands, probably her own from where crystalline edges had cut her, and her uniform was torn in several places. But she was standing. All three hostiles were down, neutralized, no longer capable of threatening anyone. And the device was being safely disarmed by specialists who would not have arrived in time if Chen hadn't moved instantly to prevent immediate detonation. I made my way to Gallery 7 as the situation stabilized, finding Chen standing with Kriv and his security team. The Krellian chief looked stunned, his forearms hanging loosely at his sides. How? He said. They were larger, stronger, more heavily built. You should not have been able to defeat 3 of them. Size isn't everything, Chen said, wincing as a medic treated her hands. They thought strength was all that mattered, thought their physical advantages guaranteed victory. They were wrong. Training, technique, experience, those matter more than raw physical capability when you know how to apply them. You knew exactly where to strike them, Kriv observed. Precise targeting of structural weak points in crystalline anatomy. That's not common knowledge. I studied, Chen said simply. Spent 6 months learning Vraxian physiology, joint structures, stress points. Spent another 3 months practicing techniques specifically designed to work against species larger and stronger than myself. That's my job. I don't rely on physical advantages I don't have. I rely on preparation, knowledge, and willingness to do what's necessary when necessary. The device was disarmed. The hostiles were taken into custody, injured but alive. The chamber was gradually bringing delegates back in once safety was confirmed. And I stood in Gallery 7, watching the small human security director accept medical treatment while Krellian security personnel looked at her with new understanding. Relax, she said, noticing their expressions. I only shatter threats. You're not threats, you're colleagues. We're on the same side. We were afraid of you, Kriv admitted. From the moment you arrived. Your reputation, your species history, everything suggested you were dangerous. I am dangerous, Chen said matter-of-factly. That's what makes me good at this job. But being dangerous doesn't mean being threatening. I'm dangerous to people who try to hurt others. I'm safe for everyone else. There's a difference, and it's the most important distinction in my profession. The aftermath took hours to process. Statements, reports, security reviews, diplomatic reassurances. The Vraxian government issued formal apologies and disavowed the extremists. The Council voted unanimously to reject the sanctions proposal and instead commended human security services for preventing catastrophic casualties. Ambassador Rodriguez found me late that evening, after most delegates had departed. "Mr. Cross, I want to thank you for advocating for Director Chen's presence here. She saved a lot of lives today." "I didn't advocate for her," I admitted. "I was as nervous about her presence as everyone else. Maybe more, actually. But you worked with her anyway. Let her do her job despite your concerns. That took courage. Or common sense," I said. She was right about everything. Security gaps, coordination needs, threat assessments. I just didn't want to admit it because admitting it meant acknowledging that humans understood something about violence that we preferred not to think about. What's that? That violence exists whether we acknowledge it or not. That threats don't disappear because we wish them away. That sometimes the best defense against dangerous people is having someone even more dangerous protecting you. I looked at Chen, who was across the chamber coordinating final security checks with various service chiefs. She's terrifying because she's competent. Because she studied, trained, prepared for scenarios we hoped would never happen. And when those scenarios did happen, she responded with precision that comes from taking violence seriously enough to master it. Rodriguez nodded slowly. Earth learned that lesson the hard way. Thousands of years of warfare, conflict, survival on a planet that tried to kill us constantly. We're afraid of what we're capable of, honestly. Afraid that our capacity for violence makes us monsters. But Director Chen represents the better path. Channeling the capacity toward protection rather than aggression. Being dangerous in ways that make others safer rather than threatening. I thought about that over the following days as the Council returned to normal operations. Thought about fear and safety, about danger and protection, about how humans made everyone nervous but also kept everyone alive. Director Chen stayed for another week, working with Council security to implement her recommended protocols. The coordination improved dramatically, information sharing increased, and most importantly, the various security services started trusting each other enough to work as a unified system rather than competing factions. On her last day, I walked her to the departure terminal. "Director Chen, I owe you an apology. I judged you before meeting you, assumed your presence would cause problems rather than solve them." "Apology accepted but unnecessary," she said. "You had reasonable concerns based on available information. That's just good risk assessment. You adjusted your position when new information became available. That's intellectual honesty. Nothing to apologize for. Still, I contributed to an atmosphere that made your job harder." "Maybe," she acknowledged. "But that atmosphere also motivated me to perform better, to prove through actions rather than words that fears about humans were misplaced. Sometimes challenges are opportunities in uncomfortable packaging. Is that Earth philosophy? That's me trying to find silver linings in difficult situations," she said with a slight smile. Earth philosophy is usually more fatalistic. Something like, everything's trying to kill you so you might as well laugh about it. Charming worldview. It works for us. She checked her departure information. "Mr. Cross, can I ask you something honestly?" "Of course. When you watched me fight those Vraxians in the gallery, were you afraid of me?" "Not afraid for me or afraid of the situation. Afraid of me specifically." I considered lying, decided against it. "Yes. Terrified, actually. Watching you move that fast, strike that precisely, neutralize threats that quickly, it triggered every predator-prey instinct I possess. I was afraid of what you're capable of, what that capability means when humans are angry or threatened." "Good," she said, and I must have looked shocked because she laughed. "Not good that you were afraid, good that you're honest about it. Fear is useful information. Tells you something is dangerous, tells you to pay attention. The problem isn't fear itself, it's what you do with it. You felt fear but still worked with me. Still trusted me to do my job. Still adjusted your assessment based on observed behavior. That's healthy fear management. And unhealthy fear management. Letting fear control decisions, preventing cooperation, creating self-fulfilling prophecies where you treat people like threats until they become threats." She gestured back toward the council chambers. "Those Vraxians who attacked, they were afraid of humans. Let that fear drive them to violence, which proved their fears were justified in their minds. Classic escalation cycle that ends in tragedy. How do we prevent that cycle? By doing what you did. Acknowledge fear, assess risks honestly, but also give people chances to prove they're worth trusting. Build relationships based on actions rather than assumptions. And most importantly, understand that dangerous doesn't equal bad. Some of the most dangerous people I know are also the safest, because they've mastered violence enough to use it responsibly. Her transport was boarding. She picked up her equipment bag, extended her hand for a final handshake. Thank you for giving me a chance to demonstrate that humans can be trusted with responsibility. Not just trusted to follow rules, but trusted to protect others even when it's difficult or dangerous. Thank you for proving it, I said, taking her hand. And for only shattering threats. That distinction matters more than I realized. She smiled, nodded once, and left. I watched her board the transport, watched it detach from the station and accelerate toward the jump point, and thought about everything I had learned in a few short days. Humans were dangerous. That was undeniable. They came from a death world that had forged them into survivors who refused to quit, who fought until they won or died, who mastered violence because survival demanded it. They moved wrong, thought differently, had capabilities that triggered instinctive warnings in other species. But dangerous wasn't the same as threatening. Dangerous meant capable of causing harm. Threatening meant intending to cause harm. Humans were dangerous, absolutely. But under the right circumstances, with the right training and motivation, that danger became protection rather than threat. Director Chen only shattered threats. That was her promise, her commitment, her professional standard. She had demonstrated it repeatedly, using her dangerous capabilities exclusively to protect others, never to intimidate or harm those who weren't actively threatening someone under her care. That distinction, between dangerous and threatening, between capable of harm and intending harm, became the foundation of improved human-council relations over the following cycles. Other species gradually learned what I had learned, that humans could be trusted with responsibility specifically because they took that responsibility seriously enough to master the dangerous skills it required. 3 cycles later, I attended a security conference where Director Chen was keynote speaker. She talked about threat assessment, protective methodologies, and the importance of distinguishing between fear and danger. Her audience included security professionals from 60 different species, all listening carefully to someone who had proven herself through actions rather than words. The thing about fear, she said during her presentation, is that it's information, not instruction. It tells you something is dangerous, but it doesn't tell you what to do about that danger. Some dangerous things should be avoided. Others should be managed. And some should be recruited, trained, and deployed to protect against worse dangers. She pulled up footage from the council incident, showing her confrontation with the Vraxian extremists. I'm dangerous. That's not modesty or bragging, just fact. I can hurt people efficiently if circumstances require it. But watch what I do with that capability. The footage played, showing her instant response to protect Ambassador Rodriguez, her measured force against the extremists, her precise strikes that neutralized threats without causing unnecessary harm, her immediate transition to device disarmament once direct threats were eliminated. Every action is calibrated to minimize harm while maximizing protection. That's what separates dangerous from threatening. Threatening means using capability to intimidate or control. Dangerous means having capability that can be deployed when genuinely needed, but otherwise remains controlled and unused. She looked directly at the audience. So when people tell me they're afraid of humans, I don't dismiss that fear. I acknowledge it, validate it, and then demonstrate through consistent actions that their fear, while reasonable, is directed at the wrong target. They should fear people who intend harm, not people who prevent harm. One is a threat. The other is protection. The difference matters enormously. The presentation ended with sustained applause from species who would have been terrified of human presence just a few cycles earlier. They had learned, collectively, what I had learned individually, that humans were dangerous, but being dangerous in the right ways for the right reasons made them essential rather than threatening. I approached Chen after her presentation. That was excellent. Though I notice you didn't mention being absolutely terrifying when you need to be. She laughed. That's implied. Anyone paying attention already knows. The goal isn't to hide capability, it's to demonstrate responsible use of capability. Let people see the danger, understand the danger, but also trust that danger is controlled and purposeful rather than random and aggressive. Earth philosophy again. Human experience, she corrected. We're afraid of ourselves, honestly. Afraid of our history, our capacity for violence, our potential to cause catastrophic harm. So we develop systems, training, ethics, all designed to channel dangerous capabilities toward constructive purposes. It doesn't always work, humans are imperfect and sometimes we fail catastrophically. But when it does work, when dangerous people decide to protect rather than threaten, the results are pretty remarkable. I thought about that conversation many times over the following years as humans integrated more fully into galactic society. They remained dangerous, remained unsettling to many species, remained fundamentally different from civilizations that evolved under gentler circumstances. But they also became valued, respected, sought after for security roles and protective duties specifically because they had mastered violence enough to use it responsibly. Director Chen's promise, "I only shatter threats," became something of a motto for human security professionals throughout Council space. A commitment that dangerous capabilities would be used exclusively for protection, never for aggression or intimidation. A promise that fear of humans, while understandable, was directed at the wrong target because humans who took protection seriously would never become the threat others feared. My name is Telvin Cross, and I learned that fearing humans isn't cowardice, it's pattern recognition with survival instinct attached. Humans are dangerous, objectively and measurably. They come from a death world that forged them into something fierce and unrelenting. But I also learned that dangerous doesn't equal bad, that capability controlled and deployed responsibly becomes protection rather than threat, and that sometimes the best defense against terrible people is having someone even more dangerous protecting you. Director Chen taught me that lesson personally, by only shattering threats while keeping everyone else safe. By being dangerous in exactly the right ways at exactly the right times. By demonstrating that humans, for all their terrifying capabilities, could be trusted with responsibility specifically because they understood how serious that responsibility was. So now when people express fear of humans, I don't dismiss their concerns. I validate them, acknowledge that fear is reasonable given human capabilities, and then explain the critical distinction between dangerous and threatening. Between having capability and deploying capability. Between mastering violence and embracing it. Humans mastered violence because their survival demanded it. But the best of them, people like Director Chen, use that mastery exclusively for protection. They only shatter threats, never innocent parties. And that distinction, that commitment, that professional standard, makes them the most valuable allies in a galaxy where threats exist whether we acknowledge them or not. Fear them if you must. Just make sure you're fearing them for the right reasons. And be grateful that dangerous humans choose to protect rather than threaten, because the galaxy is safer when monsters work for the good guys.